So it's 5 lines up. The last word of the line, Tanya Idach. Some interesting stuff here. Let's have a look. Tanya Idach, we've got another brisa. Let's just remind ourselves where we're up to. We've had a little bit of a break. Tanya Idach, another brisa. Now, if you remember, we were looking at the Mishnah, which speaks about the Yovel, the Rosh Hashanah, or the beginning, the point for the Yovel is the 1st of Tishri. That was in the Mishnah. There you go. And the Gemara then suggested that it shouldn't really be the 1st of Tishri at all. It's the 10th of Tishri, because looking at all those psukim, we find that the shofar's blown on that famous B'yom HaKippurim Taviru Shofar B'chol Haaretzechem. And then remember, the Avodim are free, lands go back. So how can we say in the Mishnah that the Rosh Hashanah for the Yovel is actually the 1st of Tishri? So yes, there is a machlokas about that. Some people learn, and this is the view of Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. If you remember, I'm just revising quickly. The Pasuk says that year, the Kiddashtem is holy from the beginning of the year. It says that year. And we explain from there that in fact it is holy from the beginning of the year, and this is the view of Rabbi Yishmael, Beno shel Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. But when it mentions that the shofar's blown on Yom Kippur, that's true. That's when they will go home. They have this, remember this halfway house where the wonderful words of the Gemara here, Oichlin b'sheisim b'smeichim, eat, drink and be merry. The host, of course, being their original master. He's now really hosting them for these 10 years, but it's at the point of the shofar they really become free. But in fact, the Yovel does commence at the beginning of the year. But the shofar's blown, don't be worried about that. There's this in between those 10 days. That is the view of Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. Others disagree and say, no, in fact, the Rosh Hashanah does actually start at Yom Kippur, goes from Yom Kippur up to Rosh Hashanah the coming year. So there's a machlokas when in fact the Yovel year starts. According to us, it starts at Rosh Hashanah, but it's only from Kippur. Everyone will agree that the shofar's blown in at Yom Kippur, and it's at that place at that time that they are then free. So there's no contradiction between the two, according to Rabbi Yochanan or Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi.
And we pick this up now. Tanya Idach. We've got this second brisa, so 4 lines up of Daf Ches on the base. Yeah? Yovel he Ma Talmud Lomo. So we've got another brisa on the same topic discussing the Yovel. Says the Gemara, there's a pasuk which says Yovel he. In fact, there are 2 psukim saying Yovel he. We have that repeated. There's a pasuk in Emor. First of all, it talks about the 50th year being Yovel he. And then the next pasuk again repeats and says, Yovel he, it is, this year is the year of the Jubilee. What's this repetition? Says the Gemara 4 lines up, Ma Talmud Loma, what is this telling us? Lefi shene'emar, because it says, V'kidashtem es shnas hachamishim, you should make the 50th year holy. Yochel, I might have thought, Kishem shemiskadeshes v'hoileches mitchilosa, kach miskadeshes v'hoileches b'sofa. What does this mean? Have a look at Rashi. Lefi. 9 lines up in Rashi.
I'll come back on here now. So maybe this is going to work. Have you got the Rashi? Lefi shene'emar. V'kidashtem es shnas hachamishim. Yeah?
Yeah? The Yalsina Mine, we learn from that, Shemiskadeshes mitchilosa. If you remember, the view we've got, Rabbi Yishmael, is that in fact it is holy from the beginning of the year. Although, as we explained, that the view of our Mishnah is that it's holy from the beginning of the year, but the shofar is only blown 10 days later, and the actual Yovel in full swing begins on the 10th of Tishri. But in fact, Kiddushtem means from the very first day, it already has that holiness of that year, albeit it really comes into, I'd say, full swing, literally, at Yom Kippur when the shofar is blown. So according to this view, you've got this in between. You're like pulling back the Kedusha. The full Yovel year starts on the 10th, and it's pulled back for Kedusha those extra 10 days. Right. Says the Gemara, back to our Gemara, 4 lines up again. The Kiddushtem you should make holy this 50th year. Right? Yochel, I might have thought, just like we bring back the Kedusha from the 10th, it is when the time, of course, the shofar's blown and everybody's free and the avodim go free, the land comes back to their original owner. But nevertheless, Rabbi Yishmael, who is the author of our Mishnah, says that it comes back. You pull back the Kedusha to the 1st of Tishri, says the Gemara 3 lines up, Yochel, one might think, Kishem shemiskadeshes v'holeches mitfiloso, just like it's holy earlier on in the year, it's pulled back. Kach miskadeshes v'holeches b'sofa. Maybe the other end, once you've gone beyond the 1st of Tishri of the coming year, maybe the actual Yovel year, the Jubilee year, is extended further out, maybe for another 10 days, just like it's extended back, maybe it's extended forwards as well.
Sorry, Norman, I don't understand this pulling back. Can you explain this?
Have a look at Rashi. Yochel, I might think, Kach miskadeshes b'sofa, it's extended and it's got additional holiness beyond that day. Achar Rosh Hashanah, after Rosh Hashanah, v'timoshech ad Yom HaKippurim, and it will continue on until Yom Kippur. Do you understand the point here? We've just seen, according to Rabbi Yishmael, the Yovel year starts, strictly speaking, on Yom Kippur. It's pulled back, and already from the 1st, it has some type of Kedusha. I might have thought, therefore, that you might extend this Yovel year beyond Rosh Hashanah of the coming year, and as Rashi says, a further 10 days. You're extending backwards, and maybe you should extend forwards. Says the Gemara, Va'al Tatame, 2 lines up. Don't be concerned and wonder. Why should you suggest that there should be an additional Kedusha forward-looking as well as backward-looking, if you see what I mean? From that Yom back the Kedusha to the 1st of the month, according to Rabbi Yishmael, why should you possibly suggest that you should extend this Yovel year after the Rosh Hashanah, according to Rashi, up to Yom Kippur? Why should you do that? Says Gemara, no. Shahare, because Moisifin Mechol al HaKodesh, we have this principle, we do add holiness to the profane. Says Rashi, Shahare Moisifin Mechol al HaKodesh, Could Omrinon Lakamon Bishmaitin. A person may say, yes, we're all familiar with this principle, but the Gemara is looking at this at first principles. Where is the source that we say, Moisifin Mechol al HaKodesh? Let me just briefly tell you what this means. We have this principle, and the Gemara will ask where we learn it from on the next page, on the next daf test. But at the moment we're saying the following. We are perhaps familiar with the idea that Shabbos, although strictly speaking Shabbos comes in, let's say, the day begins at sunset, we make Shabbos slightly earlier than that. In fact, the general minhag here in London is normally 15 minutes before Shkia, and that is a mitzvah of Moisifin Mechol al HaKodesh. Similarly, the other side, when we talk about Shabbos finishing, we don't just take an earlier time of nightfall, which we might use for davening Mar, we might use for other mitzvahs. Let's say Kriya Shema Balayla. There's a mitzvah of Kriya Shema Balayla. It's at night. We take a later time for Motzei Shabbos. So again, just like when Shabbos comes in, we make Shabbos come in that much earlier. Similarly, we make Shabbos go out slightly later, and that is there's a mitzvah. We will learn that of Mosifin Mechol ala Kodesh. A very profound idea here that the Torah is teaching us that when we have. Yes, I've got a question from Simon.
Yes, can you hear me, Norman?
You'll have to. I can't hear you.
You can hear me now, yeah?
Yes, I can. Yes.
But the Hava Minna would have been Shnas Yovel, the year of Yovel would have been Yom Kippur to Yom Kippur, right?
No, it starts Yom Kippur, but we know the year. It's not the beginning. It goes Yom Kippur and up to Rosh Hashanah.
I understand, but it's
that's
Shnas
that year.
Yovel.
Only beginning at Yom Kippur.
But Shnas Yovel, the year of Yovel, the year of Jubilee, a year, your Hava Minna would be, a year is Yom Kippur to Yom Kippur. That would be your Hava Minna. We extend it back to Rosh Hashanah. So your starting point would be, with the extension, that you start on Rosh Hashanah and you finish on Yom Kippur. That's your starting point.
No, what we're saying is this. Good point. We're saying we're taking the year beginning in Yom Kippur. Quite right. Says the Posuk, no, there's another Posuk, B'kidashtem es shenas, a year, a normal year. Says Rabbi Yishmael, no. You bring back the Kedusha. It's meant to be from Yom Kippur, but you bring it back. If you're bringing it back, the year is still Yom Kippur now. It goes from Yom Kippur to the end of the year, but you brought back from Rosh Hashanah right up to Rosh Hashanah, although strictly speaking, beginning at Yom Kippur. So the year now we've got, according to Rabbi Yishmael, it's Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah because we brought this back, the Kedusha. Really, the Torah says it should be from Yom Kippur. Says, no, there's another posuk to teach us that you bring it back. But that's only coming back. What about going forward? Does that mean we're still extending the year by another 10 days the other side? You with me? So we brought back the year, going now from, it's true, really begins the Yom Kippur. That's when the shofar is blown. We're bringing it back from those extra words, V'kidashtem, that year, a normal year that we're familiar with, going from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, albeit the shofar is blown at the 10th of Tishri, and it's at that point people are free, and at that point the lands go back. But the year now is from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, with the main event happening at Yom Kippur. So we've brought back from Yom Kippur backwards. The Gemara is now suggesting, I might have thought that perhaps as you're saying, Simon, that Yom Kippur to Yom Kippur is still in force. All we've done is we've brought back. Who tells you that it really now goes from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah with the shofar blown at Yom Kippur? Maybe it's Rosh Hashanah right up to the following Yom Kippur. We've now pushed out that year from Rosh Hashanah, the extra 10 days, and says the Gemara, we're familiar with such a principle. It's not coming as a big surprise, because we do find in other instances where we find this idea of Mosifin Mechol ala Kodesh, as I say, Shabbos, Yom Tov, Yom Kippur, where we add to the Kedusha. We add the Kedusha is added to a Shabbos and Yom Kippur. We're adding extra time. Maybe there should be extra time to this Yovel year. In other words, it will not be just 1 year. It will be a year plus 10 days. That's what the Gemara is asking. So in answer to your question, yes, we've brought back the year to Rosh Hashanah, with the main event happening at Yom Kippur when the shofar's blown. We're saying maybe we extend it out, because after all, the shofar's blown Yom Kippur. Maybe that's really the focal point, and extend out to the following Yom Kippur. And therefore, it'll be a little bit similar to the idea of a Shabbos, where Yom Kippur is the focal point. You brought it back 10 days, and you've taken it out 10 days the other end. Says the Gemara, or particularly the other end is the crucial. You've got an extra year plus 10 days. That's what the Gemara is suggesting. Says the Gemara, that's not true. Talmud loima yovel he. It itself. Have a look at Rashi. Talmud loima yovel he. Those extra words unnecessary. It's coming as a miut. Yovel he. This is a year of Yovel. Now that we've brought it back to the 1st of Tishri, it means it goes from the 1st of Tishri right up to the following 1st of Tishri, but does not go beyond that date. Okay? Yovel Shnas HaChamishim. Have a look at the last line. Shnas HaChamishim ato Makadesh, ve'i ato Makadesh Shnas HaChamishim va'achas. Do not extend, give extra Kedusha to that, beyond that Rosh Hashanah. Beyond that Rosh Hashanah, once you hit the end of that Rosh Hashanah, or you've got to that Rosh Hashanah the coming year, it is no longer the Jubilee year. There's no Kedusha. There's nothing that takes place, particularly as it's a Shemitah year as well. That year actually will come to a conclusion, and there's a special miut. That's why we have this brisa. So again, this word Yovel here, unnecessary, or so we thought. We knew it's a Yovel year. What is the Torah telling us again? It is the Yovel year. This follows the view of Rabbi Yishmael, who says we brought back the year. Maybe we should extend it out because of this principle of Mosifim Mechol al HaKodesh. This is one example where we do not extend. The Jubilee year is not extended. The Kedusha of that Jubilee year is not extended. Okay? Now that's all very nice. And now turning to the next page, which is Daf Tes Omid Aleph.
Norman, before we turn the page, can I ask, what are the practical implications of saying that the year is not extended? The key aspect of the Yovel year, as I understand it, is that people who had been slaves or servants are freed. Now that happens right at the beginning of the year.
You're quite right.
What is the Kedusha for the rest of the year? I know it's a Yovel year, but then it has the same aspects as a regular Yovel year. But in terms of the slaves going free, that happens on day one. You don't need another 360 days for that purpose.
Very good question. In fact, there are two things that happen Yom Kippur, if you remember. One, the slaves going back, also land going back to its original owner by the Shvatim, and you're absolutely right. That happens on that happens on Yom Kippur when you blow the shofar. There is a third item that happens in Yovel year, and this is crucial to the next piece that we're going to look at right now, which is what? It's also a Shemitah year. This is the occasion when you have two Shemitah years, one following the other. Year 49 will be a Shemitah year. It's divisible by 7. It's the last of that whole cycle. The next year, which is the 50th year, is also a Shemitah year. So we now have one Shemitah followed by the other, but this Pasuk is now telling me the Kedusha of that Shemitah year will stop at that. There's no extension of that Shemitah. For example, what about plowing the ground after Rosh Hashanah? It's true, we focus on the Jubilee year, slaves, property, but there is also the land, where the Kedusha of the land. Would you be allowed to plow the field after, or you cultivate, look after the ground in any way after the coming Rosh Hashanah? Yes, you would, because there'd be no extension of this normal Shemitah year. It's a Shemitah year. It follows the previous year, which is a Shemitah year, but it comes to an end at that date of Rosh Hashanah. Yeah?
But there's no half a minute. There's no half minute. It wouldn't be, because it's no different from Yovel, is it? Which the Gemara's just said we don't extend. The Gemara
that's quite right. Charles's question was, What did it mean? You see, the Gemara asked that maybe we might extend it because Mosifin Mechol El HaKodesh. Charles's question was, in which way are we extending it? The people are all free. They've gone on the 10th of Tishri. The land's gone back. What else can happen? It's not an ongoing Kedusha. And the answer to that is yes, it is. It is an ongoing Kedusha. So the question of the Gemara is, maybe we extend this Kedusha out into the following year, not for servants and not for land going back to the original owner. That's already happened. But maybe we extend the year out into the following year for the Kedusha of the land. And the answer is no, we don't. It stops at that Rosh Hashanah.
Norman, there's another practical difference in answer to Charles's point, which is not when they're freed or land goes back. I mean, it's more with land. When does that clock start ticking? Because if the clock starts ticking at Rosh Hashanah, when does the clock start ticking? The nafkamina would be if the previous Yovel finished at Rosh Hashanah, then all land purchased after that point would go back on this Yovel, right?
What about, okay, you're asking the following question. What happens to you? That's a very good question. What happens from Yom Kippur up to the Rosh Hashanah? That's your question. The year. This is very interesting. What is that Yovel year? This links up to the next piece as well. That Yovel year, it's an additional Shemitah year. So we've got now 2 years of Shemitah. The land went back at Yovel, and at Yovel it went back on Yom Kippur. What happens if any other land is sold after then? What's going to happen? We've missed the deadline. The deadline is it goes back on Yom Kippur. You'd have to presumably wait till the next Yovel, the next Yom Kippur, for land to go back in. It's already gone back.
But what about land that is bought, land that is sold between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? 50 years later.
Between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that's fine because it's Yom Kippur, the land goes back. You have raised an interesting point, actually, because when you're working out the selling and the costs, is a Yovel year a year which is outside everything? But what happens if somebody decides to sell their land later on in the year, in the Yovel year? You've passed Yom Kippur, it won't go back. You'd have to wait for another Yom Kippur. Unless there's a ruling, and I can do some searching on that, unless there's special ruling of what happens to land purchased in the Yovel year, and okay, I can look into that. It's a good point. Is there something special that happens to land which is bought from Yom Kippur up to Rosh Hashanah? If there is a special rule that would apply to that land, then you're quite right. It would be important that we know, is that Rosh Hashanah or the coming Yom Kippur?
But there was something Charles was asking the question, what's the nafkamina of extending?
Yes.
After all, the land goes back on the first of the year.
On Yom Kippur.
Pardon?
The land goes back on Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur. Now, the question is not what happens at the end of the period. I'm saying at the beginning of the period. What happens to land? The nafkamina would be if you hold that there's an extension of the previous year.
No. 1 minute. We've got, again, Yom Kippur is the day the land and the servants go back. We've brought back the Kedusha of the year to the first. But it's true, all the land and all the servants go back a Yom Kippur. That's a Jubilee year for Shemitah purposes until Rosh Hashanah. The Gemara is suggesting maybe we'd extend it outwards. We do normally have this principle of Mosifin Mechol Al HaKodesh. So maybe we extend that Kedusha. Not regarding sale or avodim, because that's happened. There's a one-off point, which is Yom Kippur.
The point I'm making is, if you extend it, then land that is brought out, then land that was bought previously in the very first year, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
That will go back in Yom Kippur.
On that Yom Kippur, that's the nafkamina.
Yes.
Whereas if you don't extend it...
No. Everybody agrees there's only one Yom Kippur for when the shofar is blown. And that is in the Jubilee year at Yom Kippur. All we're saying is we'd be pushing it out up to and excluding the following Yom Kippur. There's nothing special about Yom Kippur. That's just extending out.
There's a 50th year's Yovel. If you extend it out, what happens on the 51st year if you bought land, if you sold your land between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur on the 51st year, and that's the...
You'd have to wait. That Yom Kippur is clearly, nothing's going to happen on that Yom Kippur. You'd have to wait for the next Yovel.
The question is, that's the nafkamina that Charles was asking about. Because if the previous Yovel extends to Yom Kippur on the 51st year, then presumably...
But there's only one point in time that land goes back, you see. And that is actually at the Yom Kippur of the 50th year. Anything that happens after that is already outside. Otherwise, you won't have any purchasing taking place. So it looks at the moment, it's true, maybe there's more to be looked at into this point. What actually happens to land sold in that 50th year? At the moment, it looks like if you sell land in that 50th year, you'd have to wait until the following Jubilee, 50 years later, because the 51st year, up to nothing special about the Yom Kippur, except for the year we think extends out. But
who says you're allowed to sell land in that 50th year? We're all assuming that you can have normal buying and selling.
You're quite right. You're quite right. That I'm saying that is something I need to look into. At the moment, it sounds like you can. Otherwise, you're saying you're going to stop all purchases and sales taking place. Maybe you're right. That's my homework. Very good point.
If the whole point of Jubilee is for land to return, then it would seem logical that you can't buy or sell in that year. That would be my...
It's a very good point. If that's true, and that's my holiday homework, if that's true, that there's no buying and selling that take place at all, then Simon, you're absolutely right. What you're saying now is the suggestion is that the Jubilee year goes up to the following 10th, which means after the Rosh Hashanah in the 51st year, for those 10 days, you wouldn't be allowed to buy and sell. Whereas the Posser now tells you, no, it only goes up to Rosh Hashanah. Yeah? So that would be another practical difference. You with me? If, however, you are allowed to buy and sell in that 50th year once you've gone beyond that Yom Kippur in the 50th year, you'd have to look for other differences that would allow, the Jubilee to be extended out. As it happens, it's not extended, but we still need to clarify. I'll say that's a bit of homework for me. We still need to clarify, is there any issue about buying and selling in that Jubilee? I think that's your point, Mervyn. If you're saying it's impossible and one's not allowed to buy and sell in that Jubilee year, then that would be a very good practical difference about extending out that year. There's another 10 days you'd have to wait to sell any property. Yeah, so you're trying to make money on a property sale. You can't do that, but that we'll have to look at. As it happens, though, we have concluded here. We know that the year actually only goes up to Rosh Hashanah, and that's why we've got those extra words, Yovel He. However, although the year does go up, yes, Charles.
Can I come back?
Yes.
You raised the point as to whether there is a ban on buying and selling during the Yovel year itself.
Yes.
There is nowhere stated, as far as I understand it, that there is a ban. There is, on the contrary, a statement in relation to the Yovel generally that if there has been a sale, then the seller can get the land back. So applying that principle, during the Yovel year, there is no ban on sales, but the purchaser buys knowing that the seller can demand the land back. So
well, when can he demand that land back? You see,
and the
would
price,
he have to?
And the price will reflect the fact that it is not a sale in perpetuity or a sale for 50 years. It's a sale for maybe no more than a year, and the price would be reduced accordingly.
But the trouble is, when would it go back? You see, there is just at one point in time, which is that Yom Kippur, when all the land goes back. It doesn't happen, day after day, or and there's going to be a second bite at the cherry. I hear what you're saying. In fact, from what you're saying, you're coming back to your original question, which is, if there is buying and selling taking place, what is special about extending out the Yovel? You'd have to be back to the Kedusha, but I'd like to have that clarified. And they say that's something we need to look into. What happens to buying and selling in that 50th year? Whatever happens, we know it's a complete year. What we don't know, I'd like clarification on that. What about buying and selling it within that year? But this is all because we're focusing on Rabbi Yishmael, Benoy Shel Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, who says the actual year, hold on, I see you, Malcolm, but the year begins on Yom Kippur, comes back to Rosh Hashanah, and therefore we have these two events. There's Rosh Hashanah beginning the year, Yom Kippur when the servants are going free. That's only according to Rabbi Yishmael. According to others, what actually happens, the Yovel, there's no suggestion here. You see, the Yovel will come in at Yom Kippur. And that's what we're going to have a look at in a minute. Malcolm's got a question. You'll have to come out of mute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
So my question was just about the Shemitah idea.
Yes.
Sorry, I probably missed, you probably said something about this, but presumably the Yovel year, that the issue is like whether you can plant the fields and things and do things with them.
Absolutely. If you're having two Shemitah years, sorry?
Well, you've got this extra 10 days in question. Is that the point? There's an ambiguity. Can you do something after the Rosh Hashanah in the 51st year? That's the point. That's
what we're saying. And in the end, we've said that you're quite right. In the end, we've said it is just 1 year. It's 1 year going from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah. So as we've learned previously, the Shemitah year begins on Rosh Hashanah. So you've now got 2 years of a Shemitah. You've got a Shemitah, which is the 49th year. The 50th year as well is another Shemitah year, and you can imagine that, where there's a particular bracha. I mean, this would have been quite amazing. You talk about, miraculous. The Torah is telling us, do not worry. Imagine that. You're not planting the land, cultivating for 2 years, one after the other. And the amazing thing to think about is, sadly, we're so far removed from this, but there's a bracha mentioned. There will be a bumper crop in that 48th year that will keep you going for the going into the 49th plus the 50th. For those people who are particular, about the Shemitah, which is going to be 1 year. But you're right. We now discarded those last 10 days, or it's not those extra 10 days. We are limiting it just to one Jubilee year goes from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah and no further.
But the question I had is sort of linked, yes. Like, would they not be sort of fairly desperate after 2 years to sort of want to plant?
That's exactly the point. You'd think, yes. And this is amazing. The Torah is promising, and there is no source to say that this didn't happen. The Torah is promising. Now, one of these miraculous events, the same like in Yerushalayim, the 10 miracles that happened. I'm saying the trouble is we're so far removed from this, having been already 2,000 years since the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. But this was one of the miracles, that there was a bumper crop. You're right, people would think you'd be desperate, but you'd have plenty in that 48th year to keep you going. And you'd say, that's miraculous. And I'd say, yes. And the Torah is promising it. The same way that the Torah promises that when it comes to the Hakhel year, after the Shemitah year, every person has to come, ladies, men, children, all come to Yerushalayim. You'd think all the enemies would know that they're leaving the houses and there's going to be nobody there to look after their houses. Everybody is leaving, and the Torah says, do not worry. Nobody will think of coming, and there are plenty of, we do have sources about that, people attempting and then not managing to take over the land, to take over people's houses, thieves, etc. There was none of that happen. There was a promise, go to Yerushalayim the year after Shemitah. Remember, the king then lamed the whole of Sefer Devarim. There will be a promise, nothing will happen. Similarly here, there will be 2 Shemitah years and 49 plus 50, and there will be people will not be desperate for food because there will be a bumper crop before.
So why can I ask Norman what? Sorry, Malcolm.
One at a time, yes, sir. Sorry, Malcolm, are you okay?
I just wanted to finish, because if they're not desperate, then why not extend it for the extra 10 days, is what I'm saying.
Oh, you could. That's absolutely right. But the Torah says you don't need to.
You're saying they don't. But you're saying they don't. You said the
no, the Torah does not demand more than those 2 years. The Torah just said it's 2 years, full stop. I might have thought that it's extended outwards. Says the Gemara, no, it isn't. It is actually 2 years. You're right. They wouldn't be desperate because they'd have plenty of food. But the Torah is saying it's fine. The Yovel year is now at an end when you get to the Rosh Hashanah. I think there was a couple more questions there. It's getting a lively.
Yeah, Norman, why did we enact Prusbel then? If there was a promise that would be there'd be a bumper crop, then I mean, why was that? Why were the
Prusbel is something rather different. It's about people lending money.
Yeah, okay, fine, all right, not Prusbel.
Because at the end, what happens?
Selling the land. I mean, so Rav Kook made for the.
No, not selling land. I'm giving you a loan, and I'm scared that you're not going to repay it.
I'm not talking just about. They also allowed them to work on the land, didn't they? There was in time of Rav Kook, didn't they? They sold from kibbutzim. There was some.
You're talking about two different things.
Yeah, I agree.
The Prusbel is about loans, and the worry there was. That's a separate thing. You're quite right. The question is, if people, as we're moving further and further into Golus, the question is whether it does apply today, does it not apply today, Shemitah? There were people getting a bit wary, a bit scared, and saying, well, if we want to cultivate the land, maybe if we do sell it on, if it's owned by non-Jews, then you can cultivate the land. There were people who were scared. It is
Why
a scare.
Why do they rely on the bracha you've just been talking about?
You can ask that to a lot of people, sir. Those people who did rely on the bracha managed. There were plenty of people who did manage.
And they starved.
But sadly, there were people who were scared before that, saying that they're a bit worried. They're not going to manage.
Okay, all right.
You're right. As we move further on, people do get a bit scared. They're relying on miracles happening, and not everybody can do that so easily anymore.
Okay. All right.
But there were plenty of examples where things went very well for them. But that's all according to the view of Rabbi Shmuel. Now we move on to the next page. V'Rabbanon. Have a look at this Rabbanon here. Rabbanon de lo yalfa mikidashtem shetiskadesh. I'm doing the Rashi on the top of Daf Tes. The Rabbanon do not learn, like Rabbi Shmuel, that you bring back the Shemitah year from Yom Kippur to Rosh Hashanah itself. Everything starts at Yom Kippur. Now have a look at this. They do not learn b'kidashtem shetiskadesh mitchilosa, that it is holy from the beginning. V'lo itzrich hi limiuta sofa. You do not need this word that it is Yovel. Yeah. You see, it was only according to the view of Rabbi Yishmael who brought it back that we considered, what about extending it out? According to the view of the Chachomim, they are not bringing it back. In other words, everything starts at Yom Kippur. There's no suggestion. It's interesting. It sounds like it's a Shemitah year, according to Simon's point earlier. It sounds like, according to the Chachomim, it's a year which starts at Yom Kippur, finishes at Rosh Hashanah. It's not brought earlier, although the event happens at Yom Kippur. It's not brought any earlier. Therefore, I do have no suggestion that it actually should be extended. Again, according to Rabbi Yishmael, we learned that although the event happens Yom Kippur, it's brought earlier. Therefore, there was a suggestion maybe it's extended the other end. The Gemara says, no, it isn't. Yovel Hi. The year goes from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, and that's it. According to the Chachomim, who anyway are not bringing it earlier, then what they would say is, in that Yovel year, starting from Yom Kippur and going up to the end of that year, that's the Yovel year. It does not extend any further. There's no suggestion that it might be extended because it's not brought any earlier. Have a look at this Rashi again. V'rabbanan delo yalfei mivikidashtem. Shetiskadish mitchiloso, that it's actually holy from the beginning of the year. V'lo itztrichi, therefore they don't need this limiting word he. Limi uta sofa I might have thought it would be extended. Why should I think it should be extended? It's not brought earlier. Dorshele hochi. This is how they are learning it. Keep your finger on the place there. Let's have a look at the Gemara. Shanas chamishim atomoine. I've got this word Yovel Hi to say it is Jubilee. What does that mean? Have a look at the top line of the Gemara. Shanas chamishim atomoine, ve'i atomoine shanas chamishim va'achas. It is the Yovel year, and it's only the Yovel year. Have a look at Rashi. Fascinating halacha here. Second line down of Rashi, Dorshile hochi, shanas hachamishim, that 50th year, atomone, count it as the 50th year. Ve'i atomone shnas hayovel, you do not count a double count. This Jubilee year is not also shnas chamishim, l'soif yovel she'ovar. It's number 50 of the previous Jubilee years, the number of 50, va'achas leminyan yovel habo, fourth line down in Rashi. Maybe this 50th year, it's a very special year. Maybe this 50th year is counted in two ways. It's number 50, and it's also number 1 of the coming cycle. Oh yes. Says the Pasuk Yovel Hi, it is 50 and 50 alone. Do not count it 50 and number 1 for the coming cycle. Let's just finish the Rashi there, 4 lines down. V'iyato moine shnas hayovel habo elo mishono shel acha hayovel. The Gemara is learning the following way. According to the Chachomim, the Yovel year goes from Yom Kippur up to Rosh Hashanah. That's it. I might have thought, though, when we're counting Yovel years, in fact, the Yovel year is the 50th year, but it's also year 1 of the new cycle of 49 years or 50 years. You with me? I might have thought this is a very special year, and it doesn't fit the pattern. The patterns are 7s. 7 sevens are 49. Then you have this year in between, which doesn't seem to fit anywhere. I might have thought it's number 50, but in fact it's also number 1 of the coming cycle. So in fact, the cycles are 49-year cycles, and you really could say the 50th year, which is the first year of the next 49-year cycle, is the Yovel year. Says the Chachomim, no, it isn't. It's no man's land. It's the 50th year on its own, and it does not link to any normal 7-year cycles. And this is fascinating because look at the next piece. La'afuke, this come to exclude the view of Rabbi Yehuda. And Rabbi Yehuda says the following: De'oma shnas chamishim oile lekan ulekan. The 50th year is in fact the first year of the following 49-year cycle. So in fact, it's a 49-year cycle. The 50th year, which is in fact the first year of the new 49-year cycle, is the Jubilee year. So that's Ole Lakan Lakan. Komash Malon, we're now learning below. So the Chachomim, are you with me? There's a Machlokes, the Chachomim and Rabbi Yehuda. Now this is crucial. I tell you why. Because you're back to Mervin's point about this Shemitah year. How do you count the Shemitah year? There's a Machlokes how to count it. Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that Ole Lakan Lakan. Rabbi Yehuda says it's a 49-year cycle, and the 50th year is year one of the next 49-year cycle. The Chachomim hold no. It's no man's land. You will then start your new 50-year cycle the next year. Year 51 will be year one of the cycle. When will Shemitah then be? It will be in year 57. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it will be 56. With me? Are you with me? A crucial difference here. If you look at Tosfos, the second Tosfos down, La Fuke mi de Rabbi Yehuda, Oimeri, the Re says, Rabbi Yitzchok, Afilu hochi, even though we've used these words, this comes to exclude, it sounds very much like we're pushing aside this view of Rabbi Yehuda, who says it's counted two ways. Although we use these words, afuke, coming to exclude, so again, what are we learning according to the Chachomim? That the 50th year is a year on its own, does not count. It's a 50-year cycle, full stop. 49, the 49th year, the 50th year, and then you start again. Rabbi Yehuda's view, no. Not, the year 50 is a double job. Says Tosfos, even though we've got these words, la'afuke, Afilu hochi, nevertheless, halacha k'Rabbi Yehuda. The view and the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. The omeshnas hachamishim oine lekan ulekan, goes both ways. So we're paskening here like the view of Rabbi Yehuda, and the Gemara here has got Tosfos brings various proofs to show that other people also subscribe to this view, although it is just the view of Rabbi Yehuda. Nevertheless, we are paskening like this. Now, this is crucial. What do I mean by crucial? When today is the Shemitah? Now, we'll get to the halach in a minute, but let's first of all have a look at, I suppose the first place you might look at, as mentioned here, would be the Rambam. As you'd see on top, I've got a little aleph. Yeah, that little aleph on top, that very small aleph next to the word shanas, takes me to the side, the top. In mine, it's the top left-hand corner. It tells me to look at the Rambam, Perig Yud of Hilchos Shemitah, Halacha Zayin. So I will look there. As I remove these Gemaras, I've got a massive Rambam here. Says the Rambam, Shanas hayovel eina oile miminyan shnei hashavua. It does not count. Elo Shanas teisha v'arboim, number 49 is a Shemitah. Shnas chamishim is the yovel. Ushnas chamishim v'achas. What is year 51? Says the Rambam, Techilas sheish shonim. It's the beginning of the 6 years. And then you'll get another Shemitah after that. So the Rambam is not paskening like this Tosfos. With me? The Rambam is paskening like the Chachomim here, not like Rabbi Yehuda. Fascinating.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, David's question.
Yeah, surely they would have known what was going on. I mean, they would have been living through Shemitah years and Yovel years.
Yes.
So how could there be a difference of opinion? I mean, they must have known either it was working one way or the other way.
Absolutely. Very good indeed. More than that, we've now seen the Rambam like this. We've got the Shulchan Aruch. I'll tell you what it says in the Tur, the son of the Rosh. The Tur says, Dekaimelon, we are of the opinion, this is in chapter 331 in Yeridea. Shnas Chamishim Oile Lekan Ulekan. Oh my. The Tur, the son of the Rosh, is holding like Rabbi Yehuda. And you're quite right, David. What is going on here? Haven't we watched this, happening? And number two, what are we going to do today? How do you count? Says the Bes Yosef, and this is fascinating. You know there's the Rambam. Round the side of the Rambam is what he's called his Kesef Mishneh. He's got on the Tur, he's got the Sefer called the Bes Yosef. And then from the Bes Yosef, which is on the Tur, he then put together his Shulchan Aruch, the Shulchan Aruch. That's Rabbi Yosef Cairo. Born 1488, died 1575. And this is going to be quite interesting. The Rambam, although he's told you this principle here that we seem to be holding like the Paskin and like the Chachomim, the Rambam also mentions there's a Messiah, this is back to David's point. I'll just give you one further example, and just to prove the point, David. They stopped counting the Yovel at the time of the first Churban. You see, the problem was this. At the time of the Churban Habayis, the first destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, there's a rule learned from Psukim that as long as the majority of the Jewish people, Bnei Yisrael, are in Eretz Yisrael, then you have a Yovel. Yovel does depend on people living, the majority of the Jews living in Eretz Yisrael. If they're not, the Yovel stops. There's no such rule about Shemitah, but there's a rule like that about Yovel. So, at the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, the Yovel stopped. Says the Rambam, and he quotes a year. Interesting, thinking when the Rambam lived, 1135 to 1204, he quotes a year. Which year is the Shemitah? I'll get to that in a minute. He quotes a year here, 4,936. We're now 5780, 4936. He talks about that year being a Shemitah year. 4936, you can convert that, anybody? 4936, all you have to do is add, the very, very simple way to convert, in case anybody wants to, add 240, ignore the thousands and add 240. 4936, if you add 240, it's a bit of a play. It says, Rom Malko Goyim Hashem, Rom, the gematria of Rom is 240. It's just a quick and easy way to do it. Take 936 and add 240, and you get 1,000. Yes, Simon seems to be there.
1,176.
Yes. So put it's actually one thing. Yeah. So that's the year that the Rambam was talking about. He says that year actually is a Shemitah year, and I'll explain the way the Bes Yosef, the Kesef Mishnah of Yosef Cairo explains this. Listen to this. He says the following: we pasken like the Chachomim, which means it's a 50-year cycle. I'm reading the words of the Kesef Mishnah to you. Venirali. He says, when the Yovel is actually when it's in operation, Noyeg, like the Chachomim, we pasken very straightforwardly, it's a 50-year cycle. The Ein HaYovel Nichnas B'Minyan HaShmitah. Shemi'acha shekedushas hayovel lechud. It's got an extra kedusha on itself. Why should it be reckoned, is the view of the Chachomim, amongst the other 7 years? It's got nothing to do with that. It's a year on its own with its own kedusha. The Kiddush HaShmita L'chud, year 49 on its own. It's got nothing to do with the Yovel. However, and this is very interesting, the Chachomim were only talking about when there is a Yovel. When there is no Yovel, they would agree to the view of Rabbi Yehuda. Fascinating. Listen to this. When there is Kishain Hayovel Noeg, says the Rabbi Yosef Cairo, Kiven She'ein Kedusha Noheges Bishnas HaChamishim. There's no Kedusha anymore. There is no Yovel. No different to any other year. Therefore, it will be included in the normal 7-year cycle. It now becomes year number 1. There's no extra Kedusha attaching to it anymore. Ulakach, therefore, Mishechorav Abayis Borishon, in answer to your question, David, when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, the first, Lo Monu, they did not count from then on, except the 7s. It would all in 7s. You don't have to worry about 50s, it's 7s. The Alpha, even though the Beis HaMikdash was rebuilt 70 years later, Noeg Yovel was still not operative. They did not have the majority of the Bnei Yisrael living in Eretz Yisrael, and therefore Yovel did not continue. The Alpha, but a few emes Rabbanon lo omru elo bizman she'hayovel noeg, aber bizman she'ein hayovel noeg lo. And he said that's what our Gemara means. Although you'd learn our Gemara, in fact he picks that point up. If you learn our Gemara, you'd say that machlokas is always whether there is a yovel, there isn't. We've got to keep counting the yovel to ourselves. But as far as so that's very important for the Shemitah purposes. So for Shemitah purposes, we are still counting in 7s. With me? And as it turns out, very interesting, the Rambam's year, and I think, Simon, you said that, didn't you? Hold on. I'll get my calculator out. The year the Rambam mentioned as an example of when a Shemitah year was, I said to you, was 4,936. 4,936. Hold on. That would be if you would have counted 50 years cycle. He's therefore said, his conclusion is it's not true. 4936, the year he's talking about, is the first year of the next cycle. Don't make a mistake. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. You see, those 70 years that they were in Golus, of course, has one Yovel in there. So it's going to be interesting whether you've got an extra year or not. Anyway, the bottom line is this. The year 4936, or if you take it like this, 4935 is divisible by 7. I think I've got that. 4935 divide by 7 that's a Shemitah year. And as you said before, 4935, if you add 240, you get, what did I say, 935 plus 240 is 1175.
Yeah.
The year 1175, yeah? Interesting, that's the Lashon. Interesting, that's the Lashon of the Rambam. It's very interesting. The Rambam writes that year, what did we say, 1135. What did I say? 1175, I'm sorry. That's amazing that Rambam's writing that because it tells you how old he was. He's born in 1135. So what are we telling you? He's about 40 years old and writing the Rambam. Amazing. If I now look, on this, I'll just finish with this. The Bes Yosef, who's the Pirish on the Torah, as I've explained, the Bes Yosef is writing and says the same, well, the Bes Yosef, the same person, of course, as the Kesef Mishnah writing around the side of the Rambam. He's now giving you something himself and explaining how this works, the same way as he does there on the Rambam, and he says the following. Therefore, this year, writes the Bes Yosef, this is fascinating, in the Bes Yosef he says this year, which is the year that was the Rambam's year. We had that, the 4935 being a Shemitah year. The Bes Yosef puts it in his terms. And he says that the year 5299, now according to that 240 rule, what would you get out of that? 5299? I'm sure Simon will come with that. He's talking about the year 5299.
1539?
That's right, 1539. The Bes Yosef was born in 1485. So, yeah. So, interesting. Died in 1575. And he's quoting the year 1539, he says, is a Shemitah year. He's just going through the calculations. Right? Just to conclude, when the Shulchan Aruch, of course, came, and now we'll see when he wrote which. If you look at the Shulchan Aruch, just to show how we're paskening here, the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Reish Lamed Aleph in Yeridea, you can look that up. Question is, how are we going to pasken? So are we okay with the way this works? We pasken like the Chachomim up to the time that we're counting a Yovel. If we're not counting a Yovel anymore, we will count in sevens. Forget about the Yovel. Interesting. If you look in Yeridea, keep the calculations there. Shin Lamed Aleph. Hold on a minute. In Shin Lamed Aleph, the Shulchan Aruch here, which is written, you'll see what year he's talking about. He's giving you examples. He says, for example, the year 5313 is a Shemitah year. Now, what year is 5313? Adding the 240 rule. Thank you, Benji.
1553.
Yeah, which is much later than when he's writing the Kesef Mishnah, or he's writing the Bes Yosef. He gives you that example as being a Shemitah year, and he says you will always count in sevens. And the Shach mentions that on this point. The Kaimelon, we pasken, Shnas Chamishim Oile Lekan Ulekan. That the 50th year, even if you count 50s, it's immaterial now, because it's going to be counted as number one. You with me? If we were counting in 50s, we'd have to know when that 50th year was, because then, if it's a 50-year cycle, because the next year will be year one, and then it's totally out of sync. You can't just divide the year by 7. But says the Shulchan Aruch, yes, you can, because even the Chachomim who say that the 50th year is a year on its own, that's only when the Yovel's operative. It's not operative at the moment, and therefore, sadly, it does not have any extra Kedusha. Therefore, we do not count in 50s anymore. We count in 49s. You with me? That is the view of the Bes Yosef. There are others who disagree with that, but that is the accepted principle, and therefore using that rule actually works out very nicely. The year we are at the moment, which is 5780, we'll close with this. The year 5780, is it divisible 5780? If you divide it by 7, it works out. It turns out, and you've got a bit of a fraction after, or some decimals after that. It's now the 8. I've got 825 take off 825, multiplied by, and you'll find that we're now in the 5th year of the cycle. So it will always go in sevens. Yeah, we are now in the 5th year. Everybody agrees, according to this view, certainly of the Rambam, etc., and that's the way we paskin, that we are now in the 5th year of the cycle, and therefore 2 years' time will be the Shemitah year again. People may remember that from last time. Hopefully, we should be in Israel and see exactly how it works with the Shemitah years. But meanwhile, that will conclude that point for today.
If there was a majority of Jews in the land of Israel, that would be a basis for reinstating
Yovel. Absolutely.
That's
very
likely
quite
to
right.
happen. That will happen within the next 10 or 20 years. It's very likely that majority of the Jews will be living in Israel.
Well, that will be, you're right. It is moving that way. Then that will have to be reconsidered. Absolutely. Yes. I'm very pleased, Sam, you asked that question. We can all enjoy your gorgeous sunset you've got there. What a cracker. I hope you're enjoying Jupiter out there as well. A beautiful, so you should be able to spot Jupiter if you look carefully. You'll think it's an aeroplane. If you're looking, look south or south or southeast, you should spot something really bright in the sky. That will be Jupiter for you. Wonderful sky. Good. Enjoy. Matches your suntan.
Oh.
And yes, Malcolm has still got a question.
Sorry, it's a really big boring question. Is why in this case are they going with Yehuda? Why isn't it the majority? I don't understand why they're taking his view.
Absolutely right, and in fact, you're right. We do paskin like the Chachomim. I know. No, the Tosfos had other reasons. It's a very good point. Tosfos does paskin like Rabbi Yehuda. And the reason for that, it's a long Tosfos. He brings other great Tanoim elsewhere who also seem to subscribe to that view. Although you're right, normally you'd follow the majority. This is an occasion where you would follow the view of Rabbi Yehuda because there are other people mentioned elsewhere in all the Talmud who seem to subscribe to his view. But this is only the view of Tosfos. The Rambam does not paskin like that. Very straightforward. He paskins like the Chachomim. So that's in answer to your question. But even the Chachomim would only say their view that the 50th year is a separate year, according to Rabbi Yosef Cairo, only when their Yovel is functioning. If it's not functioning, even the Chachomim would agree to Rabbi Yehuda that in fact it goes in sevens. Okay.
Norman, we don't always paskin like the majority. We paskin like Rabbi Meir.
No, we don't. No, we don't. No. But I mean, Malcolm's got a good point. You have to have a reason why you're not paskin like the Chachomim. And Tosfos in that Tosfos does explain why, because there are other people subscribing to that view. But you're quite right, Mark. We don't always paskin like the Chachomim, but it would be a very good way to start. And I think your question is absolutely relevant. You'd have to say, why in this instance shouldn't we paskin like the Chachomim? And Tosfos does explain why he thinks we shouldn't paskin like the Chachomim. The Rambam doesn't. The Rambam paskins like the Chachomim itself, and therefore that's fine. Any other questions before?